get the good information from him. So, very good morning to all the students.
Good morning,
Today we
sir.
will start. Yes, today
Morning,
we will
sir.
start with the fifth block, and it has lots of good important things. I will discuss only few important points of every aspects. Okay, and the block is called the late Roman world. The late Roman world, basically the religion, state, and society. This block title is the religion, state, and society, and the unit is called the late Roman world. Here we will see lots of important things. Basically, basically we will discuss the changes through which the Roman Empire passed through since the beginning of the Christian era. Beginning from the first century AD, the Senate lost its power and gradually the monarchy got established. The structure of state and the system of administration underwent many changes. Towards the end of the 3rd century AD, the empire got divided into separate administrative zones. So, by the 4th century AD, the empire was formally divided into Eastern Roman Empire with its capital at Constantinople and Western Roman Empire with seat of power at Rome. In this way, we will continue our discussion. The economy structure also underwent changes here right now. The most significant changes during early centuries were in the realm of religion. The Christianity came in contact with the Roman world. So the changes in polity, economy, society, religion in the late Roman Empire influenced the contemporary Roman world and had far-reaching consequences on the history of Europe and Asia in early Middle Ages. So these are the introduction phase of today's unit. If I will talk about the background, then I will see here and I will inform you after the death of Julius Caesar. What happened after the death of Julius Caesar? Then uh, uh, after the death of Julius Caesar in 44th BC, it took Octavian around 13 years of struggle and war to defeat his rivals. So in 31 BC, he managed to emerge as ruler of Rome. It was difficult for him to crown himself as monarch in view of traditions of the republic. So during the reign of Augustus, there were some changes happened during the rule of Augustus. What were the changes has happened during this time? Basically, I will talk about the reign of Augustus. There were three components of the Roman state: the emperor, the senatorial oligarchy, and the army. And Augustus successfully maintained the balance between these three components of the state. He also developed an imperial bureaucracy which was responsible only to the emperor. So, during his rule, Augustus concentrated all powers in his hand and took approval of the Senate only as a formality. So, Augustus inaugurated a long and glorious era of peace and stability lasting around 200 years, which was defined by the term of Pax Romana. It means the Roman peace. Augustus died in 14th century AD and his adopted son Tiberius became the emperor and he ruled till 37 AD. Between 14th AD and 68 AD, four rulers ruled over Rome. By the mid 3rd century AD, the Roman Empire had a truly composite ruling class. Despite Roman presence in Syria, Palestine, Anatolia, and the Parthian, which is called Iran, remained the most formidable polities and military force in West Asia. Basically, what is the nature of late Roman Empire? If we will talk about the nature of late Roman Empire, then after around 100 years of prolonged anarchy and instability, in which more than 20 emperors came to rule the Roman Empire, and triangular conflict between the emperor, the senate, and the army. Always the triangular conflict between these three phases. One is emperor, one is senate, and another one is army. In 284 AD, Diocletian, Diocletian came to power, and the empire was stabilized. He streamlined the administration, and for this purpose, he divided the empire into four autonomous parts, of which each one of the ruled by an emperor. So after the retirement of Diocletian, Constantine I became the emperor of the empire. After his retirement, he became the emperor. The dynasty's ambitions resulted in the end of the hierarchy. Okay, and Constantine I founded the city of Constantinople, now Istanbul in Turkey, which became the capital of the eastern part of the Roman Empire. Under the rule of Constantine I, the character of the Roman state changed significantly because he was the first Roman emperor who stopped the persecution of Christians in the empire, and he was baptized to the Christianity just before his death. After the death of Constantine, the main emperors to rule were Constantius, Vietnam one. These are the name of the rulers. Okay, Christianity became the state religion, and all heathen sects were prohibited. After the death of Theodosius in 395 AD, the Roman Empire was partitioned into two separate, the Western Roman Empire and of course the Eastern Roman Empire, between its sons. From the middle of the 4th century, the Central Asian tribes had increased their incursions on Eastern Europe. In this way, in the middle of the 5th century, the Hunos launched a vigorous invasion under the leadership of Attila. Their attacks included Italy and Gaul. So, new socio-economic structure emerged in the West as a result of the occupational and rule over Roman territories by the Germanic tribes. If we will see clearly the Roman state, then Augustus successfully maintained a balance between three components, which I told you already: the emperor, the senatorial oligarchy, and the army. Augustus developed a separate bureaucracy which owed its authority to him and was loyal to him only. He was careful to use the titles of the officials on the lines of the republic and got them appointed through Senate, which was only notional and satisfied them to some extent. So his priority was the consolidation of the empire rather than expansion. So he was very cunning ruler, because he was always giving his mind how I will consolidate his empire rather than expansion. So he succeeded in monopolizing all the powers of the state, his dynasty which continued till 96 AD. But what happened during this time? From the end of the 2nd century AD, the army began to play a crucial role in the selection of emperor and was playing a assertive role. The situation continued for almost next 100 years. The relationship between the Senate and army gradually weakened and ultimately broke down. Okay, if you will talk about kingship in the later Roman Empire, it is very important to discuss about kingship, because in the reign of Diocletian, the Roman Empire was finally divided into two territorial parts. One was known as Western part and the second as Eastern. Italy, Gaul, Spain and North Africa were the parts of the Western Empire, and Syria, Palestine, Egypt, Iraq, modern Balkan countries of the Eastern Europe were parts of the Eastern Empire. In this way, the monarchy of the late Roman Empire was firmly rooted in the eastern provinces. So, in this region, the emperor could exercise unrestricted authority without caring about the Western aristocracy. Diocletian spent most of his time in eastern part of the empire, and he made his capital the city of Nicomedia near the Black Sea in northern Anatolia. In the late Roman Empire, most of the emperors came from Danubian Balkan region of Europe. So, in the late Roman Empire, Diocletian was the first emperor who organized the state on monarchical pattern, and tradition of monarchical system continued for next 100 years. He began to wear splendid, beautiful royal dresses. He also started to place a crown on his head. He adopted the royal title as Dominus et Deus. The late Roman Empire is being called dominant by the historians. So, in this manner, he started the era of pomp and splendor in monarchical traditions. So, the ordinary citizens were remain of their victorious campaign in various way on a regular basis. The victory arches were not only built in Rome but in other important cities of the empire. If we will talk about Senate at Constantinople, then the era of Republic and Principate, the Senate was an important political institution. Its members were elected from among the patrician of Rome for life, and these members made a ruling oligarchy. Senate was a very powerful body to run the administration of Roman Republic in the era of Roman Emperor also. If we will talk about army, it has taken a very good place in Roman Empire. Basically, from the very beginning, the army was an important component of the Roman state. Roman army was the key factor in the expansion and protection of the Roman Empire, but it was headed by the emperor. In the era of emperors, the Roman state had become the strongest military power of its time. The army was regularly deputed by various emperors on the border provinces to protect its territory against the non-Roman world. In this way, especially against the Parthians, the East and the Germanic tribes on the Rhine and Danube, the soldiers of Roman Republic used to stay away from their homes when they were in the battlefields, and often they lost their property at home too. After the downfall of Republic, the soldiers were being used for political advancement by the army generals. From the first century AD, the Roman army had become main instrument in installing various generals to the throne of the Roman Empire as emperors. What happened during this time? This is the time of Augustus, who allotted the land to thousands of soldiers. Augustus allotted the thousands of soldiers because such measures created discipline and loyalty in the army and helped to convert the army into a permanent and professional force. In the late Roman Empire, Emperor Diocletian recognized the army and introduced a constitution. In the 3rd and 4th century AD, the total strength of the army was nearly 450,000 soldiers. It had now become the custom for sons of soldiers to enter the army. Most of the top military commands were now entrusted to men of equestrian and rank only. So in the reign of Constantine, the army was again expanded. He created new cavalry and infantry units. He also built up strategic resource. By the end of the 4th century AD, the army strength of Roman state went up to nearly 650,000, more than 4 times of the early Principate. In this way, the later Roman Empire was powerful state with a vast military, political and ideological superstructures. So, civil administration was very important to discuss because it's the very important part of the empire, civil administration. If we will talk about this, then in the later empire, the career in the civil services was built up around a pyramidal hierarchy of bureaucrats. The post of the bureaucrat would confer on him a certain style and dignity from whatever point he started. The rulers were the head of officials. The officials were being called magistrates, and they were also heads of various departments. Basically, the provincial administration was very crucial in the late Roman Empire for maintaining law and order in the far-flung areas. With the downfall of the Senate's power, the senatorial provinces disappeared and their administration became an absolute resort of the emperor. Diocletian made radical reforms in the provincial administration, and he divided the whole empire into 100 provinces. The number of officials was increased and they had become efficient officials of the empire. Of course, the administration of the provinces in the late empire was headed by the governors, and it is always linked with the judicial system. If we will talk about judicial system, then we will know the Roman civil law was the basic of Roman imperial state. The Principate raised Roman jurists to official positions within the state. When Augustus selected prominent uh, judicances as advisors and conferred imperial authority on their interpretations of the law. So, under Diocletian, all justice was exercised in the emperors, named and administered by his officials in the provinces by the parasites, and the capital cities by the uh, praefectus urbi. Okay, the civil law protected the interest of the rich classes and had provided the guarantee of property right to these classes from the very beginning. The criminal law was essentially designed for the lower classes and remained as arbitrary and repressive as it had always been social safeguard for the whole ruling order. After the civil administration and judicial system, then definitely we have to discuss about economy of the late Roman state. If we will talk about 4th century AD, produced a temporary growth in the urban development and restored monetary stability with the issue of gold coins. The urban growth was largely concentrated in new military and administrative centers. So Constantinople became the important urban centers in the late Roman Empire. Okay, and there was gradual realization of the empire. In the antiquity, the slave mode production was connected to a system of political and military expansion. The slaves therefore were converted by landowners into dependent tenants to the soil. The role of slaves in urban production began to decline, but they were still the backbone of the household services for the partitions. In this way, the whole economic system of the late Roman Empire was based on the relationship between dependent ruler producer and of course the landlord and the state. The citizens were taxed in the form of unpaid military service for the state and they had to procure their own fighting equipments. In the later empire, the policy of increased taxation was pursued by the Roman state. The policy was successful in the east, but it produced crisis in west part of the empire. Then, if you will go to next structure, that structure is called as the social structure. Social structure totally based on the upper classes, of course, the lower classes, and the slavery. If you will talk about upper classes, then proprietary classes of the late Roman Empire were known as equestrian classes. The classes was not only settled in Italy, but the members of these classes were also settled for business reasons in provincial towns and occupying magistracies and priesthoods in their cities and providing chambers of the army. Basically, there were other social groups who had higher social status, but they had not attained the membership of equestrians. They were owners of land, shopkeepers, traders, high and grade employees, etc. They live in Rome and their towns of Italy and provincial cities. Other town also the Italian provincial cities. The period from middle of the 4th century to the end of 6th century witnessed many changes in the nature of powers and authority of the upper classes. If we will talk about the last phase, the last category, that is lower classes and slavery. The lower classes, basically the lower classes consisted of such men who provided the services To the higher classes, the peasants were the biggest such group. Apart from the peasants, then porters, teachers, entertainers, prostitutes, maybe they included among them. There were also the free laborers, and of course, whose members were also quite high. So, there were also skilled workers such as bakers, silversmiths, wool workers, etc. Slavery was an important social category. If we will talk about slavery, then it is an important social category in the Roman Republic as well as in the reign of Roman emperors. Now the slaves were permanently settled by the landlords on their estates, and they were given small plots to look after themselves. Okay. The Roman Empire has very good impact on the religion. If we will talk about religion in the late Roman Empire, then of course new religions like Judaism and Christianity got introduced to the Romans. Of this Christianity, after initial hostility, got wider acceptance in the whole Roman world. In this section, we will also discuss various religious traditions with Roman Empire and the spread of Christianity. What happened after the early religious sects? Basically, in the age of Roman Republic, there were various deities, gods, which were being worshipped by the Roman seat elites and common people. The supreme deity of the city of Rome was Jupiter, who was regarded as the king of god. Mars was also another important deity because he was considered the god of war. In the Roman Empire, the religion was an integral part of the Roman state, and the religion was polytheistic, belief in or worship of many gods. In every part of the empire, especially in the west, the people followed different religious cults. So, in other parts of the Roman Empire, the Greeks, the Anatolian communities, and the ordinary Syrians, Mesopotamians, Egyptians, and North Africans had their own gods and goddesses. The Roman state religion was managed and organized by pontifex. The dominant religion of the Roman may not be considered as the sole religion of all people of the Roman Empire. So basically, the Cybele was the popular cult of Anatolia, and it was related with the mother goddesses called Cybele. And Cybele was the first cult which was made a part of the Roman religion. It was the first cult which was part of the Roman religion. Then, of course, we will talk about Judaism. Judaism and Christianity originated in the region which at present constitutes Palestine and Israel in West Asia. Before the emergence of Christianity, the Judaism, the followers were called Jews. Okay, was the major religion of this region, and Judaism provided the fertile ground for the birth of Christianity. Basically, Judaism is a very old religion in the world. The story of its origin is contained in the book of Genesis. The book is a part of the Old Testament of the Bible. The Judaism had begun with a movement of Western Semitic tribes in West Asia. The Judaism was founded during the course of a migration of tribes led by Abraham, and it had become a monotheistic religion of West Asia with substantial number of followers. So they believed that there was only one supreme God known as Yahweh. He was to be worshipped, and there was no place for idol worship in the Judaism. In this way, in the process of growth and spread of Judaism, a number of sects with different interpretations of religious tenets and had developed among the Jews in religion of Palestine. Then of course the Christianity in late Roman Empire had become very good influence on the people, and the spread of Christianity, basically the religion became a popular religion of the Roman Empire by the 3rd century AD. The imperial government persecuted Christians largely for political reasons, for the popularity or acceptability of the Christianity among the common people of the Roman Empire was enhancing day by day. One of the important factors responsible for the spread of Christianity in such a large area was the vast spread of Roman Empire. The Christianity could be presented as a religion open to all without any hidden grades of initiation. So the Christianity also spread to other parts of the Roman Empire through trade and commerce. Apart from the message of love and brotherhood, the institution of church also helped in the spread of the faith throughout the Roman Empire. The early church had been able to develop its theology and to create a remarkable administrative structure of the church. So in this way, we will also discuss about the Christianity and the Roman state. Basically, Christianity grew rapidly and, and enough during the 3rd century to alarm the Roman state and emperors. The following Christianity was growing very fast in the 3rd and 4th century despite suppression of Christians by the Roman state. So, thousands of Christians had already joined the Roman army. They were also part of the bureaucracy in the eastern part of the empire. After the Battle of the Milvian, basically breeze in 312, Constantine issued the edict of the Totalitarian ending the persecution of Christians. In this way, the Christianity grew further in the following centuries and spread its wings the other parts of the outside of the Roman Empire. So the Roman Empire, basically these points are here where I have already discussed about the kingship, senate position, army, civil administration, judicial system, their economy, their social structure, and of course we got some points from the religion. After this unit, then we will go for the next unit, that is the Arab world. The Arab world.
Bisway sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, 1 minute. Let me intervene. Let us have a discussion, okay? Because it is creating problem for because they are confused. Let us say
Okay.
if the student will have any doubt, they can ask question.
Okay.
Friends, if you have any doubt on particularly related to Roman Empire, you can ask question.
Okay.
Because then you will proceed to next unit.
Okay. Any
Dear
questions? Any
friends,
doubts?
if you have any doubts, particularly emergence of Roman Empire and socio-economy, polity, and religious life of the Roman people, if you have any question in your mind, you can discuss with Bisway sir. He is very much now. He will switch over to another unit.
See,
So
basically
otherwise,
the Roman state. I am telling you, basically the Roman state covering the kingship, the senate position, the civil administration, the army, and of course the judicial system.
okay, sir. One student has asked regarding the Christianity. Christianity, he has asked. She has asked. Lipika Rani has asked that Christianity and the Roman state, how the
Okay.
Roman state accepted or the Christianity.
Yes.
Judaism, of course, was the oldest religion in the world. How
Yes.
Judaism
Yes. It is one of the oldest religion in the world related to the Judaism. The Christianity, basically this religion has given many messages, good messages to the society. It is very good,
percolated into the
very
talk about a little bit about Christianity and the decline of Judaism. Or you
yes,
can say, please,
yes. So Christianity has given lots of good information. Basically, the good knowledge, how people will go for the good path. And this religion, very ancient religion, one of the very ancient religion in the world. Okay, and if we will go through the Christian religion, then we will know very much information from the Jesus Christ, and he has given lots of information to the society and how the society will go in very good way. So Christianity and Judaism, of course, the part and parcel of the one place. So the Christianity became very powerful religion in the world. Of course, the earlier time and also the right now.
No, because of the patronage, because of the
Yes, yes.
patronage of the emperors. Otherwise, a religion during that time, a religion became powerful instrument because of the patronage
Patronage
provided
of the
by the
emperor.
emperor.
Yes.
Otherwise, a religion cannot be a powerful source. So during
Yes.
that time, it happened also that many Roman emperors, they gave their provided their patronage to the Christianity, so that Christianity became a powerful instrument which dominated the polity of the Roman Empire. Because
Yes. Yes.
you see, the polity and religion, it was completely attached. You can find attached, and that was found in Roman Empire. And due to the patronage provided by the Roman emperors and towards the Christianity and Judaism,
Yes.
of course, it is the oldest religion. Many concepts have been derived from Judaism, but Christianity, it was a purified form. It is a
Yes.
purified form, and this Christianity was accepted by the people because of the force used by the Roman Empire, Roman emperor.
Yes.
So if you want to know much about, somebody asked that judicial system, discuss about judicial system and religion on uh, Roman Empire.
Okay. Okay. Judicial system.
Judicial system means their legal system,
Huh,
legal
sir. Yes.
system
Yes.
or
Yes, basically the judicial system in the Roman state, it was very clear official positions within the state, with Augustus was taking very good care the judicial systems and the interpretation of the law, and all justice was exercised by the emperor, named administrative by the officials. Okay, and basically the civil law was related with the judicial systems. The interest of the rich classes had provided the guarantee to property right to these classes from every beginning. So the criminal law was essentially designed to the lower classes and remained as a arbitrary and repressive, as it had always been social safeguard for the whole ruling order. So the Roman civil law was the basic of the Roman imperial state. So judicial system and the civil law protected the interest of the rich classes. Okay, and it is always a high corpus juris civilians, and it became the foundation for the legal system, which were basically subsequently throughout the Europe. So the judicial and civil law both are related to each other, and this became very popular. This became very powerful throughout the Europe after the time. The judicial system was like that. Okay.
okay. Anybody, any question? Regarding, sir, another question. Somebody asked about religion, religious life maintained by the Roman people.
The religious life, as I told you, the religious life, basically the religious life they had in many republics were various, as I told you, many deities, the goddesses and gods which were being worshipped by the Romans. Okay, Roman elites and common people also. The supreme deity of the city of Rome was called Jupiter, who was regarded as the king of gods. And of course, another side, the Mars was also another important deity because he was considered the god of war. Okay, Mars was considered as the god of war, and supreme god was the Jupiter. Okay, in the Roman Empire, the religion was an integral part of the Roman state, and the religion was polytheistic. Polytheistic means belief in or worship of many gods, worship of many gods. Polytheistic. In early part of the supreme, especially empire, especially in the west, the people follow different religious cult also. The later time, the people also follow different cults. In other parts of the Romans, basically the Greek, the Anatolia communities, as I told, and the ordinary Syrians, Mesopotamians, Egyptians, North Africans, they had their own god and goddesses. So in this way, the Roman state religion was managed and organized by pontifex. Pontifex means priest. Okay, and the dominant religion of the Romans may not be considered as the sole religion, but of the people of the Roman Empire. So the religious is really having very good structure in the Roman Empire. All peoples are very deeply believed in the religion sect in Roman Empire.
Sir, another question. Somebody
Yes.
asked that attitude of Roman state towards Christianity.
Okay.
How the Roman state accepted Christianity and how it became a, you can say, state religion. State
Okay.
religion. How
Okay.
the
Okay.
Roman Empire or Roman society or Roman state accepted the Christianity and what was their positive attitude towards Christianity.
Yes. The attitude of the basically the peoples are having very much interested to accept the Christianity, because the Christianity religion was patronized by the kings, and the kings though patronize the Christianity, so the Christian religion has many good aspects, very positive things are there. So the Christianity always giving good path, how we will be strong in the society, how we will take the good path. So the attitude always be good. So the Christianity religion basically it's a good things for the peoples, for the peoples will get good knowledge from the Christianity. So the attitude is always good, because though many things, many positive things, many good things are there, and the patronage of the kings are very more there, so the peoples are accepting this Christianity very much in the Roman Empire. Okay.
Okay, let me add something. Let me supplement something.
Yes, sir.
Actually, the Christianity, Judaism followed by Christianity,
Yes, sir.
and when there was a thing, there was a when the emperor accepted Christianity. Ultimately, why? Because it will if the king accepted Christianity, ultimately what will happen? Religion will protect emperor, will
Yes.
safeguard emperor, and there will be no revolution. There was always a threat of revolution when only the religion can protect an emperor. So that was
Yes.
the belief, even if in our society also. So that is why when the Roman emperor accepted Christianity, ultimately what happened? It was a state policy or state religion, and the emperor wanted to spread it out in the Roman Empire, so
Yes.
that Christianity can be a state religion and they can be protected because they can be considered as a divine, or you can say divine power, or you can say they are the representative of you can say the God,
Yes, sir.
and they want to spread it out in the Roman Empire. So that is why
Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir.
they were ruling the state, or they were God. So when emperor and the elite section or the senators accepted the Christianity, ultimately it became a state religion, and the Christianity gradually percolated, or it entered into the
Okay. Okay. Any more questions from this unit of the late Roman world?
हेलो
Hello.
हेलो
Hello.
हाँ हाँ सर
हाँ
व्हाट आर
कुह
द बेसिक्स हाँ हाँ
any question.
व्हाट आर द बेसिक सोर्सेस ऑफ इकोनॉमी इन लेट रोमन पीरियड
what are the basic
sources of economy if you write in points then what will be the points
Okay,
the
okay,
basic
okay.
points, the basic points, the role of slaves, urban growth, okay, and rural production, agricultural production, manufacture, and of course the trade. So these are the basic points you have to write one by one. Then he will explanation of this all sub points. Okay, he will start with urban growth, then role of slaves, rural producers, agricultural productions, manufacture, and of course the last part one is trade. Okay, these are the basic points of economy of the late Roman world.
Okay, next question. Otherwise, you will switch over to another because another unit.
Yes, yes.
Any doubt? Okay. Okay, let him switch over to another unit if the time will be there because another 30 minutes we'll have a discussion. Let him finish another unit and we'll
Okay,
have
sir.
a again discussion.
Okay,
Okay,
sir.
sir, continue, sir.
Yes. Then after the late Roman world, then we will see the next unit, which is very important for knowing for all. That is the Arab world, the Arab world. If we will talk about the Arab world, then it has many things to discuss, but still we have to take very few important things. That is, if we will talk about the 7th century, another major force was emerging in the neighboring Arab world. This new force had its origin in the South, Saudi Arabia, and drew inspiration from the new religion, the Islam. During the whole of the 7th century, large-scale territorial expansion of the Islamic State uh, took place in and outside Arabia. They conquered Iraq, they conquered Syria, Palestine, Egypt, and of course Iran, and stretched from Spain to China. If we will talk about this unit, then definitely we will first familiarize with you the society, the state, the religion, and religion in Arabia and region around it before the rise and spread of Islam. This will be followed by an account of the rise of Islam and foundation of the Islamic State. We will discuss also the advent of Islam contributed in transforming a tribal society and polity. Basically, after the death of Prophet Muhammad, the institution of Khalifa comes into existence. So the Khalifa was the head of Islamic State and who also vested with religious authority in the absence of a separate priesthood in Islam. Khalifa has basically the powerful persons of the Islam world. So besides the period of the first four Khalifas, we will also discuss the major dynasties following the rule, the Umayyads and the Abbasid, instead of a separate discussion on society, religion, and state also. The Arab world and its environs before the advent of Islam. I will talk only very few things. That is basically before we move on to the analyze the rise of Islam and emergence of Islamic state and society, it is very important to say briefly examine the prevailing condition the region around Arab and Arabian Peninsula. Because Islam was born in a tribal and distant environment, but it soon found ready acceptance in regions which had been the cradle and civilization for centuries, basically the Egypt, the fertile Christian and Iran. So that we have to study not only the conditions of the Arabian Peninsula, but also the areas where Islamic culture and institutions reached their rotations. So Islamic civilization, while incorporating many new elements, also included newer developments within old traditions. If we will talk about the great empires, in the 6th century, the area in which Islam was to spread was largely divided between two cultural and political powers. The Eastern Roman Empire or the Byzantine Empire, with its capital at Constantinople, and the Sasanian Empire, basically with its capital at Ctesiphon on the river Tigris. The old Roman Empire had been reorganized under a centralized political structure towards the end of the 3rd century. The center of the empire had shifted to the Mediterranean basin. Many of these moments of religious dissent accelerated to disruption of the state. So the semi-divine Roman emperor was supported by a vast bureaucracy organized in a pyramidal structure. Okay. And basically powerful but shorter-lived kingdoms had also risen in the Yemen in the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula from the early as 1,000 years before the Christ. The prosperity of the Yemeni kingdoms did not last long, for they fell victim to the struggle between two great powers. The contribution of the South Arabian to future developments was in the patterns of trade they had developed through the desert to their north. And of course, the South Arabian trade had also led to the growth of trading centers like Makkah in Western Arabia. So, in this way, we will discuss also Arabian Peninsula very lightly, because the Arabian Peninsula was in close proximity to both the empires and was influenced by their fortunes. Okay, it was also a part of the cultural zone where the monotheism had been established as the popular religious belief system through Judaism and also Christianity. Both religions of the Abrahamic traditions. Okay, then of course here we have to discuss little bit about the tribal society of the region. Okay, tribal society before 1000 BC, nomadic people lived in this area with their domesticated asses. Around 1100 BC, the camel seems to have been domesticated with far-reaching consequences. The camel was ideally suited to this area and it made too easy to deal with the desert. Okay, because they are very comfortable to desert. So with their camels, the Bedouin became the independent political force, difficult to be controlled by settled populations. The camel nomads were called themselves Arabs. Camel nomads. They were called themselves as Arabs, and designation that they maintained even after they had settled. So for the nomad, the tribe was all important, and the individual could not survive without it, because tribes traced a real or fictitious commoner ancestor, and each tribe was sovereign. There acknowledged no outside authority. In this way, the fact that the tribe was the most powerful communal organization meant that political unity was impossible in Arabia until Muhammad provided the supra-tribal ideal of the Ummah, or the community based on Islam. So rise of city of Makkah, how it has grown, because the rise of city of Makkah, where Muhammad was born and spent his formative years, was a very special settlement. It was the unchallenged commercial and financial center of the peninsula. Makkah also had a fresh water spring, because Makkah was protected by a range of hills from the Pirates and the Red Sea, and was the juncture of the north, south, and east-west trade routes. Arabian kingdoms had flourished because of this trade, and Makkah was crucial to it. So that Makkah was established around the spring of Jamam, Jamjam around 400 AD. Originally, its market must have worked on a barter system. That means exchange system. So by the end of the 6th century, a full-fledged market system had developed. The trade was enormous and involved goods from China, India, and of course South Arabia, and slaves from the East Africa only. Okay, this system linked the inhabitants of Makkah to the rest of the inhabitants of Arabia. So both the nomadic and the settled. So Makkan merchants carried the goods of these tribes, claiming no share of the profits in exchange for safety. In this way, there had been thus a growing tendency towards the centralization of worship, something to which Mohammedan would put a seal. Once again, I will say here, Makkah, once urbanized, naturally drifted away from the ideals of tribal pastoralism. Its main suppliers of food were Egypt and Syria. Makkah had also reached the limits of its developments and could develop on further without becoming a part of the large political unit and part of a more realistic geopolitical entity. So by the early 7th century, the alliance with the tribes was also under strain, and this was due to the increase in Makkah prosperity and the increasing disparities between the settled populations and the Bedouins. In this way, the tension within the social fabric of Makkah were equally serious, because the clan was replacing the tribe as the main unit of social life. This was the later weakened by a pattern client relationship. And lastly, I will tell you definitely here, accumulation of wealth in a few hands led to social stratification. The powerful men in Makkah got richer by exploiting two contradictory elements. the condition of a free market, and the power that they had as leaders of their clans. If we will talk about the rise of Islam, it is very important to discuss the rise of Islam, because Muhammadan, the prophet of Islam, established the Islamic State. Okay, he founded this state in the desert oasis of Medina. Islam was originally the answer to the problems facing a tribal society in transition, but it came to influence the cultural and political developments in areas with highly developed cultural and political tradition of their own. So, if we will talk about the prophet and his message, because Muhammad's missions first unconscious and then deliberate was to unify the various section of the Arab society. Okay, he has given a very good message. That message was unconscious and then deliberate was to unify the various section of the Arab society, unify the various section of the Arab society according to a new principle of solidarity of Islam. So the revelations convinced Muhammad that he had been chosen as the Rasul Allah, the messenger of God, Allah, the messenger of God, the instrument through whom God wanted to communicate his message to the people. He continued receiving this message till his death. Muhammad's message did not condemn commerce only because only unfair practices and the social responsibility of the wealthy. He sought to establish a new sense of community based on the realization of the equality of men before their creator. So, in 620 AD, what happened this time? In 620 AD, Muhammad had begun a dialogue with a delegation from Medina, and in 622, after prolonged negotiation, they pledged a physical protection to Muhammad and his all followers. If we will talk about the foundation of the Islamic State, then we will definitely discuss a group of Jews had settled around the oasis at Medina and prosperous state growing center. Its prosperity encouraged local tribes to invade and occupy it, because we'll see here in Medina the Muslim could not suddenly become agriculturist. They were a trading community and competition with Makkah was inevitable. So in 625 AD, a major attack was launched by the Makkans to destroy the Muslims, because the desperate Makkans collected a much large force. So in order to blunt the charge of the cavalry, the Muslim dug a ditch to protect themselves. Muhammad's success attracted more tribes to him. The Makkans realized that they would have to reach compromise with the all Muslims, because Muhammad's consolidation of power shows how well Muhammad understood political realities. So that theoretically we will see here the Muhammad's position never changed, for there was no new concession of charter. If we will talk about the society, then it has some changes. What are the changes in society? Basically, what were the bonds that united the new political society? Many scholars, basically from the Western scholars, have been given their view on religious motivation of the mass of converts. This contrast with the over simplified and idealistic expansion of Muslim writers who tended to represent the process in completely religious terms. Because did the tribes joining Muhammad's system accept his religious authority among with the political one? So it would be correct to say that they would have been more conscious of Muhammad than of his mission, and that their response was to prophet rather than to teaching of Islam. So that Islam not only responded to the spiritual needs of the religious, but also suited many of the political, cultural, economically, socially and psychological needs of the Arabs. Okay, so if you will go through the rule of the first four Khalifas, okay, after the Prophet of Muhammad, then these four Khalifas came to take the power. Basically, I will talk about the death of Prophet. Following the death of Prophet, the first division appeared among the all Muslims. No one could succeed Muhammad as a prophet because he was having very good qualities, but no one has having the qualities like him. So Muhammad said designated no political successor, though someone to guide the temporal affairs of the community was clearly needed. In this way, the Khalifas had no authority in the matters of the religious doctrine which was available to the prophet, but there were three main groups supporting rival contenders as successors, of which Ali and Abu Bakr were the most important among them. But Umar, who was to become the second Khalifa, was instrumental getting a consensus in favor of Abu Bakr, a senior companion of the Prophet. And we will little bit talk about these four prophets, basically the Khalifas, Abu Bakr, Umar, and Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman and Ali. Abu Bakr, the time is 632 to 34 AD. Abu Bakr, at the first Khalifa, was mainly concerned with what have come to be known as wars against apostasy. Basically, he had to reassert the authority of the Ummah. There were six main areas of conflict. Interestingly, four of these were led by men claiming to be prophets. Fighting occurred in many parts of Arabia, and Abu Bakr succeeded in establishing the leadership of Medina all over the peninsula. So many of the tribes who Abu Bakr fought had never accepted Islam. If we will talk about Umar, his time is starting from 634 to 44 AD. Okay, 634 to 44 AD. It was during Umar's Khalifa that most of the fertile Crescent Egypt and much of Iran was conquered, because it was also under him that the patterns of the government and finance of the Islamic realm were the first worked out. A man of tremendously energy person. Basically, he was a first violent opponent of Muhammad at Makkah. He was the first a violent opponent of Muhammad at Makkah, but once converted had become his great champion. His success was uncontested. Nevertheless, his contributions were significantly, we can say that. But the list of the victories of the Arab armies under him is very impressive. Umar consolidated this new territorial gains administratively, because he appointed governors to administrate the newly acquired provinces. He was very foresightness. He was having very foresightness, so that he was doing all this work. Umar's policy made it easy to establish control over the newly conquered areas. And of course, he has done here one good thing, because Umar also created a diwan, a register of those who were to supported by the state, and it included all the Arab Muslims and was a way of paying the troops and sharing the wealth of the empire with the non-combatants. So it was also Umar who decided to use the Islamic calendar for administrative work. So in his life he has done very good work. So if we will talk about Usman, then his time is starting from 644 to 656 AD. What he did? Basically, Usman was chosen by a council as the Khalifa. In his reign, expansions continued eastwards into Iran and westwards from the Egypt. Usman did not break from the policy of Umar, because whatever the policy has done by the Umar, it was really very good for the common people's development of the state. So Umar has not broken anything. He was followed to him. So is building Umar of building strong centralized authority. Okay, to ensure loyalty of his governors and administrators, he began appointing members of his clan, the Umayyah, to important posts. Umar's restriction on Arabs owning property outside of the peninsula were also disregarded, and some privileged families were followed to build up large estates. If we will talk about the Ali, he was the last Khalifa of the Arab world. Basically, the main important persons of the Arab world, these four, and the last one is Ali. His time is starting from 656 to 61 AD. If we will talk about Ali, then he was a cousin and son-in-law of the Prophet. After the murder of Usman, he was recognized as Khalifa everywhere except in Syria, where Muawiyah basically refused to accept his authority. Ali's reign witnessed the first civil war among all Muslims. Ali had many of the qualities necessary to be a successor of the Muhammad. He was among the first to convert, and he had been closely associated with Muhammad. Okay, he was brave, pious, and loyal to the ideals of the Quran. So, when he finally acquired the Caliphate, its sacrosanct character had been tainted by Usman's murder. In this way, we have already finished this four Caliphate. Okay, the Abu Bakr, Umar, Usman, and Ali. Then we will go through to the Umayyads Caliphate. The Umayyads Caliphate, basically, many historians has given their view, both in early Arab and modern, see the establishment of the Umayyad Caliphate as a abandoning of the original ideals of Islam as a theocratic community and its replacement by secular kingship. If we will talk about political unity of the Muslims provided by the Umayyads, made it possible for Muslims to develop and elaborate upon the inner meanings of the Quran. Then we will talk about the stability of the Islamic State, because that made it possible for this to be disseminated among Muslims over a span of several generations. If we will talk about Muawiyah and dynastic rule, then Muawiyah 661 to 80 proclaimed himself as a Khalifa at Damascus, the centralized power of the Muslim state. It was the centralized power of the Muslim state. Damascus, okay, which had been established by Umar and seriously challenged during the Caliphate of Ali, was restored. Muawiyah has less dependent on the approval of the holy cities of Makkah and Medina. Basically, Muawiyah functioned as an autocratic monarch. Kingship as an ideal was abhorrent to the Arabs, and therefore Muslim rulers continued to refer to themselves as Khalifa. However, Muawiyah was conscious of the damage that conflicts over succession could inflict on the Islamic State. He therefore declared his son Yazid as his successor. Here we will discuss about the end of the Umayyads. Okay, the economic needs of the state, continued to grow, as did the pressure on the peasantry, because the tension appeared as Arabs started acquiring lands and began to develop into a class of privileged intermediaries between the producers and the state. So non-Arabs began migrating to the flourishing cities and becoming Muslims, and segregations between Arabs and non-Arabs began to grow. So basically, we will talk about the Abbasid Caliphate. Abbasid Caliphate, basically, we will talk about the Abbasid had come to power, espousing many popular causes, particularly the claims of the Shias. Abbasid's power was based on the military support of their Khorasani soldiers. Okay, and the Abbasids built the city of Baghdad and made it their capital. And of course, under the Abbasids, no province bearing perhaps Syria was discriminated against. The Abbasids also tried to remove the differences between the Arabs and the new Muslims. So, if you will talk about the little bit economy here, then we will see the commerce flourished because of peace within the empire. The empire had extremely busy ports not only in the Indian Ocean and the Persian Gulf, but also in the Black, Red, Caspian and the Mediterranean Sea also. Markets grew, okay, and prospered. So everything is developed here right now. Okay. So in this way, we will talk about the lastly the decline of the central authority was reflected in the series of disturbances which the Khalifa had great difficulty in quelling. The new movement against the Khalifa tended to concentrated in territorial blocks. Okay, the populations preferred the effective local governor to the distant and ineffective Khalifa. In the ninth century, the Aghlabids became the independent in Tunisia. So in 909, the Fatimids replaced them and who extended their control of Egypt in the second half of the 10th century. So we have already finished here the all discussion materials, whatever I thought important. And the Arab world has very good aspects here. Rise from the because we have already started the rise from the Islam to Arabian Peninsula. Okay, and they are very important messages of the prophets, foundation of the Islamic State, how the society has changed time to time, and after the Muhammad, the prophet of Muhammad, then we have already seen the four Khalifas: Abu Bakr, Umar, Usman, and Ali. Then Umayyad's Caliphate, Muawiyah and its dynastic rule, and of course the last and the end part of the Umayyads. Okay, so let us discuss on this topic. If you will have any confusion, yeah, you will have any doubts, then we will clarify it. Okay, so do you have any questions from this unit? Hello.
Hello, friends. Do you have any doubt? Otherwise,
Do you have any doubts?
next unit. Do you have any doubt? Please ask question. Please ask question. Otherwise, because the time is short, so we cannot wait. Just you, whatever the doubt you have, you can write on the
Yes.
chat box. In the chat box, you can write so that I can put question.
And sir, that will be possible if you will, all the students will study deeply all the materials, whatever you have.
One student has asked the crucifixion of Jesus Christ.
Yes, sir.
Crucifixion, how he was crucified. Jesus Christ, Lord Jesus Christ, how he was crucified. And another question is that the position of slaves in the Roman society. What was the position of slaves in the Roman society? And another question, somebody asks,
No, sir, it is better to discuss here right now about the Arab world. If there is any question,
what
otherwise,
factors were responsible? What factors were responsible? So there are many questions. Okay, very good. That another question. Somebody asked, what caused the rise of
Yes, yes.
Islam? What caused the
Yes.
rise of Islam? That's a very interesting question he has put. I hope that this question can be clarified in a very simple way.
Yes, yes.
And first, let us see that uh, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. And let me clarify. Just Biswesari, please tell something in nutshell that why Jesus Christ was crucified.
yes. So
In a
basically,
nutshell, because if you elaborate it, it will take another 30 minutes. So the
yes,
many factors are responsible. Just in a nutshell, you just explain to the student that why Jesus Christ was crucified, what was the background. Because there was a, you can say, religion was one side. Jesus Christ point of view was completely opposed by a group of persons who was very much sided with the emperor, you know,
Yes, yes,
and they instigated the emperor to crucify him. So just to highlight some important components, important
yes.
points in this regard.
Basically, the Roman state, I told you the kingship pattern, okay, and the position of senate, okay, and the civil administration, and of course the judicial systems, okay. uh, these things has given the main source for the Christian world for taking the main aspects of this issue, and for that the Roman state has become Christianity for this important points. So the Christianity always welcome by them, because the all basically the rulers basically patronize, the kings basically patronize the Christianity. So the Christianity became very popular in this area, okay. So Roman state fully, though it was kingship and the senate position was very strong, and the army and civil administration was, though it is good, so judicial system was very popular, so that the Christianity welcomes every aspects to the society, okay. And the rise of Islam, there was a question about rise of Islam. Basically the rise of Islam, there are few important points, because the Islam, the Prophet Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad has given very good message to the society, how the society became unified, and for unify he has given many important messages, good message, okay, many messages to the peoples, how the peoples will get good unifications, okay, though they have many problems, but still how they will improve, and how they will improve themselves, how they will get good things from the society, okay. So the transition, but it came to influence the cultural and political developments, okay, with highly developed and cultural political traditions of their own things. So the Muhammad, Prophet of Islam, and he established the Islamic State in the desert, okay. But Islam originally the answer to the problem facing a tribal society. So the rise of Islam basically, uh, hello, we can,
Yes, yes, go ahead, sir. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
yes, basically we can say that due to many important things of Islam's, many important notes of Islam, positive things of Islam, so it has taken a very good place in the society, especially in the world, of course, in the Arab world, and the people said lots of impressed, because it has many good aspects, and it has many good aspect to accept it. So after Christianity, of course, the Islam has taken a very good place in the world, because of many merit things are here, because of many good things are here. So people are accepted it, and after accepted, they have taken very good things. They developed their life, and there are lots of good things are described here in Islam religion. Okay, many important things are there. So that the rise of Islam are main things in the Arabian peoples, and it has taken a very good place in the world also. Okay,
Okay, somebody asked that uh, how Umar consolidated the Islamic State. Umar,
okay,
consolidation of Islamic State during
okay.
Umar period.
Yes,
When he
Umar
was
Khalifa.
ruler,
Yes.
what type of consolidation activities he undertook for the expansion of empire in the Arab country?
Okay, okay. And exactly, he was coming after Abu Bakr. Okay, what the Abu Bakr has not done in his time, so
Okay.
Umar was trying to do all the work, whatever he has left. Okay, basically, he has done some good work, especially in Islamic regime and especially for the financial order. Okay, if we will talk little bit about his good work, then he has done some good work. Basically, the territorial administration. He was consolidated the strong administration, especially the territorial areas. He appointed few governors. Okay, he appointed few governors, and that governors called amirs. Okay, to administrate the newly acquired provinces, which was not done by the Abu Bakr. Okay, and later he also did one very good thing, that is created a diwan, a register of those who were the supported by the state. It included all the Arab Muslim and was a way of paying the troops and sharing the wealth of the empire with the non-combatants. And of course, Umar decided the Islamic calendar for the good administrative work. So this is the main thing which was done by him after Abu Bakr.
Okay.
Please, sir, discuss the point, please.
Point?
Point, please. This question point.
This question, what are the points you want?
Okay.
Yes, sir.
What's the question?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Sir?
Umar, you just 1, 2, 3, just write, because they were writing points. These points you
Okay,
can write
okay,
it down.
okay.
You
Then
can
write down. Okay, yes. Okay. Just write down 3 points here. Then you will write next time whenever you will study your material. You just write down very few things. Just write down here one thing I will tell you. Okay, you just write. Umar consolidated. Right here, Umar consolidated this new territorial. Umar consolidated these new territorial gains administratively. New territorial gains administratively. First point. If you will write to second point, then you just write here, he appointed governors. Okay. First time he mentioned he introduced the governors. He appointed governors to, yes, he appointed governors to administrate the acquired provinces. He appointed governors to administrate the acquired provinces. Okay. Then if we will go to third point, then third point, it is very important. He also created a diwan. He also created a diwan. Okay, diwan. And write down the fourth point also. He decided to use the Islamic calendar. He decided to use the Islamic calendar for administrative work. You just write these 4 points.
Yes, sir.
He decided to use the Islamic calendar for administrative work. Okay, then shall we start, sir? Shall we start the next unit? Okay, I'm going towards the last unit of this block. That is very interesting. The unit is discussion. The unit is tested about China. Okay, unit 19, the China, and it has many important aspects like the China's state, the Chinese society, the religious tradition, and many more things. Okay, so due to lack of time, I will discuss very little bit. There are very important things I will say here. Okay, the social and political order of pre-modern China was the most stable and most highly organized in the world. Okay, and pre-modern China has been characterized in many different ways. It has been called a form of Oriental despotism or a bureaucratic society. Oriental despotism. Okay, it is otherwise called a bureaucratic society. It has also been characterized as a gentry society or a Confucian society. Okay. Whenever you are getting time, you just study the books. If you are having the materials, if you will have not any materials, you just try to collect some materials from the internet also. Okay, as the sir told earlier, you just take the material from the internet. Otherwise, go through the graduation books. There also the history of Arab, the history of Christianity, the history of China. Everything is there. Okay. So in China, if you will discuss the state, basically we have to discuss very few things. The most remarkable product of traditional Chinese civilization was the imperial state, with the tradition of more than 2000 years and lasting in basically unchanged form for nearly 1000 years. Most distinctive feature was rule through a highly structured bureaucracy or elite crops of official, the so-called mandarins, who were the main recruited through a system of examination based on scholarship. Okay, if we will talk about the scope of the Chinese Empire, then basically the Chinese Empire was the contradiction between its universalist self-image, you know, the actual territorial limits of its administrative power, being the preeminent power in East Asia and separated by formidable mountains, deserts, sea from any other power comparable in size and strength. We are discussing about the geographical location of China. Okay, it was natural that the Chinese considered their empire to be inclusive of all under heaven. The emperor of China was seen not just as the ruler of those provinces directly governed by him, but as a benevolent authority presiding over people far and near. Then, if we will talk about the Emperor of China, then we have some notes here. The basic function of and responsibility of the Emperor in China was to maintain order, both the political and social order, and also the natural order of things. In the first sense, the Emperor was the supreme civil and military head. All officials were directly appointed by him and were directly accountable to him. So emperor was having very good place in the empire. He was the supreme lawmaker and the final court of appeal in all cases. He also commanded the armed forces. He was also a significant sense the cultural head of its people, and great importance was attached to his role as the patron of learning and art. For these reasons, the political system in China has been characterized as a despotism or autocracy. Okay, because we have already seen here that the Chinese emperor has many powers. Okay, everything was dependable on him. So whatever the peoples were doing were, so it was firstly they had to take the permission from him. Then they will start to do the work. The next thing I will mention here, the bureaucracy. Okay, throughout its long history, China was subjected to as much warfare, internal rebellion, foreign invasion, and changes of the ruling house as any other society. Over the course of 2000 years, the bureaucracy in China acquired its own distinctive method and style of functioning, its own elaborate set of rules governing recruitment, promotion, transfer, and even appearance and behavior also. So the bureaucrats were indeed experts. Okay, but they were experts in the management of man and human affairs in general. But by and large were not technocrats with specialized knowledge of certain subjects. They presided over the key posts in the administration. In much of the same way, the members of the civil services in India today are today are expected to. Hello,
Hello.
hello.
Please
Okay.
go ahead, sir. Please go ahead.
No, sir. Some sounds are coming from the there. Okay,
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 I'll take care of. I'll take care
okay,
of.
okay. By far the most distinctive feature of the Chinese bureaucracy as compared to other pre-modern bureaucracy was its method of recruitment. The method of recruitment was really very good there in China because the emperor was very strong for the all the aspects, and he has many power to stabilize the country, to stabilize the all functions, to stabilize the all work. So he was having lots of good power, lots of responsibilities, so that his administration was very strong, so that every type of work was coming under by him. After that, then if we will talk about the society of China, then we have few important points like the agrarian society, first point. Then second point is gentry dominated society, and the third one is society centered around the family and clan. Okay, if we will talk about the agrarian society, then Chinese civilization first arose on the basis of settled agricultural communities in the North China plain. The bulk of Chinese society consisted of peasants. Okay, the peasants are more there, and basically the Chinese agrarian society was covered by the 99% of the peasants. Okay, over time, however, the burdens of paying taxes, dealing with rapacious government agents, and eking out a living and the diminishing plots of land. In this way, the cost of increasing numbers of peasants to become rent paying. The peasants have become rent paying. So here, tenants on the lands are big landowners. What happened during the time of 11th to 13th century AD? This is very important to discuss. I am going to discuss very little bit here in the period about the 11th to 13th century AD. China underwent profound economic transformation. Yes, economic transformation was there during the time of 11th to 13th century AD. Basically, the basic framework of the agrarian economy. Okay, rapidly expanding internal and external trade led to the growing specialization and commercialization of agriculture. The widespread use of paper, money, sophisticated instruments of credit, the rise of big merchants, families, some of them amassing fabulous wealth. In this way, the second point we are going to discuss, the second point, gentry dominated society. So what do you mean by gentry dominated society? That means the modern society. That means the dominated society which is called in modern, gentry dominated society. And it was starting from 11th century, also proved a water washed in terms of the composition of the ruling class in China. Before that, the ruling class was a kind of aristocracy which owned its dominant position to a combination of a high birth, okay, control over huge landed states and position of military power. So the ruling elite that emerged thereafter has been called a gentry. The ruling elite has been called a gentry. Ruling elite, a class distinguished by a combination of land ownership, education, and government service. Okay, they belongs to these three categories. One is land ownership, second one is education, and third one is government service. They are called as a ruling elites. Okay, within the class of gentry, the elite group consisted of the very small number of individuals who actually held imperial office. Okay, social mobility frequently help us as a distinctive feature of pre-modern Chinese society, reflected the ideal rather than the reality. If we will talk about the gentry dominated social structure, then we will say the structure reinforces the imperial political power in various important ways. Okay, then the last point is there, the family and the clan. Okay, basically the basic unit of Chinese society was the family or household rather than the individual. There was, so even in government record and taxes registers, the Chinese family was patriarchal. Okay, patriarchal, that means the male dominated society. Okay, with a strict hierarchy and relationship. The average size of the family in China was not big, but particularly among the peasantry. Okay, but the ideal of the large joint family presided over by the family patriarch, and with all the sons and their families living under one roof, and was cherished and implemented where feasible, particularly among the upper class, even where all members did not live together. Kingship links were jealously maintained. The kingship maintained but jealously. Okay. Then if you will go to the next thing about clans, then I will talk about little bit clans. Clans often transcended class lines containing both the poorer members, but the existence of clans nevertheless did not mitigate the class divisions in the society as a whole. But state approved a large and well-knit families where people were taught the qualities of obedience, loyalty, and respect for hierarchy, all qualities which the imperial government liked to see among its subjects. If we will talk about the religion after society, then religious tradition has taken a very good place in Chinese civilization. Basically, we will talk about most influential and dominant belief system of the Chinese was Confucianism. Okay, Confucianism, which was totally unconcerned about questions such as the existence of God or an afterlife, the existence of God or an afterlife. There was a big confusion about them. Okay, and who said a pronounced this worldly orientation. China also lacked a tradition of a strong, centrally organized religion or priesthood. If we will talk about Confucianism, then the term Confucianism refers to the teaching of the philosopher Confucius, who lived in the 6th century BC. Okay, the Confucius philosophy was called as the Confucianism in the 6th century BC, living in age a great turbulence and the breakdown of social and political institutions. Confucius' primary concern was to find a way out of the chaos and to restore order and moral values. The centerpiece of his philosophy was the notion that this could be achieved if truly moral men or gentlemen were to emerge. So Confucius stressed few things in his philosophy. Confucius stressed few things in his philosophy. He has given supreme importance of certain qualities. What type of qualities? Such as benevolence, okay, filial piety, loyalty, sincerity, etc. If the right man were in charge of all affairs, Confucius believed, then peace and harmony or virtue would be restored in the society. Okay, so Confucius has given a very good message to the people of China, basically through his philosophy, and that philosophy is called as a Confucianism. Okay, then we will discuss about the religious tradition which is associated with Confucianism. Okay, Confucius himself was hardly concerned with notions of God or an afterlife. Okay, Confucianism, as it grew, developed a cosmology and metaphysics, some elements of which were derived from ancient pure Confucian religious traditions, and some of which developed later, partly as a response to the challenge posed by Buddhism and Taoism. Okay, a prominent tradition which came to be accepted as part of the Confucian tradition was the practice of ancestor worship and observed by the Chinese from all walks of life. And I will talk here, apart from this was the notion of heaven and of fate. It was believed that heaven determined destiny on all matters ranging from affairs of state to the most personal aspects of an individual's life. Then trying to predict or understand what heaven had in store for man, or the practice of practice of divination was another feature of the Chinese religious tradition. The concept of yin and yang, or the unity of negative and positive elements, and of the 5 elements were also part of the Confucian belief system. Okay, so these are the main things which I have already told you, and little bit I will talk about Taoism and Buddhism. Basically, after this Confucianism philosophy, then we will discuss the Taoism and Buddhism within these 5 minutes. Okay, the influence of Taoism and Buddhism of the Mahayana variety. Taoism began really in the same period that Confucius lived. Okay, simple mystical philosophy put forward by its founder Lao Tzu. Its founder was called Lao Tzu, and in contrast with Confucianism, Taoism was not concerned with the affairs of society or the state of moral values, but with the exact opposite, with nature, with spontaneity and special attitude towards life. The Buddhism was absorbed gradually into China after its first introduction from about around 1st century AD. Its influence peaked in the 5th to 8th century AD when enjoyed the patronage of Chinese rulers and the Buddhist strains became very powerful. So, some general characteristics of religion in China. In conclusion, I'm going to conclude it here. In conclusion, some important features of religion in China were as follows. Basically, electic. In other words, as it was practiced by the people. The different religious traditions were not considered mutually exclusive. An individual could follow Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism without feeling the need of identify himself with one only. They can choose any religion here, no problem of them. So, the state in general tolerated different religious faiths and persecuted them only when it was feared that they were becoming rival centers of the power or were undermining established social norms. And the moral dimension of Chinese deities was not so strong. Rather, gods and goddesses were worshipped because of their believed power. Even they are also believed to the god and goddesses, the ideals, okay, to help or harm in individual or group. So, in this way, we have finished the discussion of Chinese, the Chinese civilization, the all aspects of China. Okay, here we have discussed the state, the society, the religious traditions. Okay, then we have few times to discussion. Then one by one, if you will have any doubts, confusion, then ask the question. From this unit, do you have any doubts? Ask the question.
Okay, somebody asked what is the, it is a very simple question. What is the meaning of ancestral worship? Because people believed, let me clarify, people believed in this spiritualism. They believe that their ancestors have created this family, and to protect them or their family, they used to worship their ancestors. Still then we are in India also, we are also worshipping our ancestors as they have created us, and they are preserving and protecting us from any kind of natural calamities or any kind of maladies or any kind of issues or difficulties. And we believe that they will protect us and they will save us. So that is why, even if we the Shraddha system in the in Indian or Hindu system, Shraddha means every year in annually we are remembering our ancestors, that they are the preserver, they are the protector, and they are safeguarder. They are the safeguard, and who can save us from any type of natural calamities or difficulties, and they can stand by us during any time of crisis. That is called ancestral worship. This ancestral worship, even it practiced by the tribal people, and this system also practiced. This system also found in other countries also. So, any more question? Yes.
Any other
Now it is
question?
open for discussion. Now it is open for discussion. Please, put your question.
Yes, put your question, please.
Because he
Hello.
has actually presented, because it's, if it will discuss, because if we'll discuss one by one, it will take minimum 6 months. Remember
Yeah,
to
yes, sir.
complete this syllabus. The syllabus is
Yes.
very vast, but he has rightly collected all the materials. And another question, Sir Mr. Sahu is asking Confucianism
Yes, yes. Your question is Confucianism.
in China. Confucianism in China, how it emerged, and how it was patronized by the Chinese emperor.
Yes, yes. The Confucianism basically the 6th century BC. Confucianism refers to the teaching of the philosopher Confucius. Firstly, we have to know the philosopher Confucius has given this ideas through this philosophy, which is called the Confucianism, who lived in the 6th century BC,
Okay.
and his primary concern was to find way out of the chaos and to restore order and moral values. Okay, and he has given some important points here. Basically, the certain qualities, as I told you, such as the benevolence, okay, the loyalty, the sincerity, the filial piety. Okay, so these things has given by him through his philosophy. That philosophy is called as a Confucianism. Okay.
Any question? Is as rightly mentioned, Confucianism is a philosophy or advocated by Confucius. Confucius is a philosopher. He has prescribed certain principles. That principle, it was found in a philosophical form, and that is called Confucianism. Okay,
Yes.
and it was completely rightly. Then, what was the religious tradition in China?
Yes.
What
Yes,
was
sir.
the religious tradition in China? And that should be, I think he has some doubt.
Okay, sir. The religious tradition, basically, as I told during my discussion prior, it
Okay.
was very, yes, it was very elastic, and it was what says a practiced by the people, very much practiced by the people in different religious traditions. Basically, the individuals could follow any kind of religion like Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism without feeling the need to identify himself with anyone. Okay. And the second thing we can mention here, we can discuss here also, the state in general tolerated different religious faith and persecuted them only when it was feared that they were becoming rival centers of power, and the moral dimension of Chinese deities was not so strong because rather gods and goddesses were worshipped because of their believed power to help or harm an
Eh,
individual group. Okay, so they
please
have the
mute your
option
mute
whether
your
they will
speaker. Some
follow
kind of.
the Confucianism, whether they will follow the Buddhism, whether they will follow the Taoism.
Okay.
So
Okay.
without feeling the need of the identify himself with anyone,
That means.
anything, so they can follow these things.
Okay, there are, that means it
Okay.
indicates that there are many religious practices and practiced by the Chinese people, and when there will be they will when they fear that this religion, it will be a rival to their culture, rival to their polity. Definitely, they became very much opponent. So that was the very there are that means there are many religious practices around China, and people who are given the opportunity, people given the free hand to adopt any religion as per their choice. But question is that when there will be any rivalry, when they will feel that, or immediately they will take it as a opponent religion. So another question is that explain again Buddhism in China, and another question is that what was Buddhism in China, again explain Buddhism in China. China is, let me explain. So China, you will find Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana Buddhism you will find in India because the Buddhism originated in India. Okay, and gradually it spread to other parts of India, other parts of world, and because of its simplicity, because of its simple approach, simple philosophy of life, simple philosophy of acceptance, because of these reasons, so people of the world, they accepted Buddhism. But one question I'll raise here: Buddhism originated in India, but it gradually disappeared. But Buddhism, which did not originate in China, became a religion, a state religion, became a state religion there. Reason is that when Buddhism it originated in India, that time there was no opponent, there was no protest, and the protest it came from rise of Brahmanical religion, which originated from Hinduism. So there was a stubborn protest from Hinduism on Brahmanical religion, so that the Buddhism could not survive in Indian soil as it was in the beginning, and that was the spirit. It was never found in the latter period, because the Brahman also, they gradually simplified the religion, simplified the Brahmanical philosophy, simplified the nature of worship. So that is why it was not accepted, and the Buddhism was not accepted by the people as it was earlier. And you see, and the other countries of Southeast Asia, or you can say East Asia, you'll find Buddhism is spread out because of its simplicity. It's a simple approach. It is a simple philosophical approach. So people accepted it because people easily accepted it, and people easily understood the concept and the philosophy which was embodied in the religious testaments or religious treatises written by the Buddhist philosophers in different periods of time. Even a different travelers, they came to India in different periods of time, collected visited different Buddhist monuments, Buddhist places, Buddhist bihars, and collected huge, you can say, Buddhist philosophical testament or treatises, and codified it in their own language, and when they return back to their own native places. Even if Wensang or Itzing, many are, you can say, they came to India and visited many places in even Nalanda University was visited, even Gaya was visited, and many Buddhist places were visited by Wensang, and he collected information about the socio-economic, polity, and religious life of the people. At the same time, collected philosophical concept of Buddhism, and it was codified in its own form when he returned back to China. And in China, that is why Chinese emperor very cunning. You remember, Chinese emperor, they sent all this because by that time India was very much rich in religion or village philosophy, in the form of philosophy, in the form of religion, in the form of economy, in the form of polity. India was very rich during that time. So the Chinese emperor heard it, and he was highly impressed. And with the patronage of the Chinese emperor, many foreign travelers or pilgrims, they came to India and visited many places of India, and they stayed in India, and they mingled with the different religious people. They collected their philosophical, you can say, essence, and took those ideas from India to China. And as a result, you'll find in China, you'll find Buddhist became a powerful source of religion in comparison to Hinduism or you can say Buddhism. Presently, Buddhism and Jainism is not so popular in India, but whereas in China, Buddhism was very popular because of its simple philosophical concept, and which was accepted by the Chinese people, and there was no protest as such. but the protest was made from the Brahmanical society or Hinduism, so that it could not survive, could not sustain on the Indian soil. That will be, I hope that Biswai sir will accept my opinion. I hope. And I hope that this is a discussion. If you want to, if you want to know more about it, we can have a discussion on Buddhism and Jainism, and how Buddhism, it was why, because there is a question in the civil service also, a very good question was asked, because Buddhism, it originated in India, but it could not so much popular in India. Why? And it was very much popular in other Southeast Asian nations or Asian nations. Why? What are the reason? What are the force it prevented the spread of Buddhism in India? And it was not, or you can say, it could not make it a popular religion in India. And what was the force? What were the internal force or external force which prevented to make it a popular religion in India? So in the next class, we'll discuss about Mahayana Buddhism and Hinayana Buddhism, how Buddhism was split into two major segments. And Vajrayana sect, I will talk about Vajrayana sect, Sravastivadin, and these are the things. Vajrayana sect, how you'll find Ladakh, Leh Ladakh. If you visit Leh Ladakh, you'll find the people are truly Buddhist, and they were the Vajrayana community, because they thought that Lord Buddha is the incarnate, is one of the incarnate, or one of the incarnations of God, and they used you can say different kind of magic, or use it in their day-to-day life, and they used it. They thought that Buddha is the savior, Buddha is the protector, Buddha is the preserver, and they use some kind of you can say magic and magical form. So these magic was very much used in the, you can say, Vajrayana sect or in Buddhism. So it was called Vajrayana communities. Vajrayana community is a different community that will be very much interesting. But Hinayana and Buddhism, Mahayana sect also very much is prevalent in India, because what are the reason for split of these religion into two parts, Hinayana and Mahayana, and how the split took place, and what are the Sravastivadin, and this will be discussed and in thoroughly. And because as a result, because it is related to our society, Buddhism, spread of Buddhism, popularity of Buddhism, acceptance of Buddhism, patronage of Asoka towards Buddhism. So it is very much related to the society and polity of our, you can say, of our society. So that should be discussed. Don't worry, have a patience. With these few words, I wind off this program again. And on behalf of the Regional Center, I thank Biswai sir for his nice presentation. Really, he has presented nicely. But due to paucity of time, scarcity of time, it could not be explained in, or you can say, we could not go into deep. Okay, but each and every component will touch upon and will give a light to so that it can be understood, and it can be explained, and it can be written in your, you can be able to write the examination. So that is why our purpose is to explain each and every component which are relevant for you. So with these few words, again, I thank you very much, and we have a nice day. Thank you, Biswai sir, and we'll meet at 10 a.m. sharp. So with these few words, thank you very much.